This discussion on factory overhead is focused on departmentalization. Okay, so let's start. Now, basically, we have two kinds of departments. You have your producing departments, and then you also have your service departments. Now, when we say producing departments or production departments, they are directly engaged. Okay, so that's our that's our magic word. They are directly engaged in manufacturing activities. Like, for example, layout and cutting of materials. Okay, you have the department on assembly, then you have your finishing department, you have your packaging department, okay, and so on. And then you also have your servicing or service departments. Okay, they assist indirectly, okay, by rendering service to your production departments, no? Like, for example, maintenance and housekeeping, o yan. Purchasing, if you have medical, yan, medical department, ano ba yun? Okay, they assist in the producing departments. Okay, so ganun yun. Now, before we go to the procedures, okay, when we say departmentalization kasi, okay, our focus is how are we going to compute for the predetermined overhead rate, okay, for each departments, since these departments have different allocation basis. Okay, syempre madali lang yan. Okay, if you have your budgeted factory overhead. So under departmentalization, okay, the computation for the predetermined overhead rate is still the same, no, like our previous discussion, but we will just focus on the computation of the budgeted overhead for each department. Okay, so how do we identify that? Okay, so these are the basic procedures. First, you calculate the departmental predetermined overhead application, and then you apply this rate to the production on department basis, and then you record your actual manufacturing overhead cost by department. Very easy, no? Gaya ng previous discussion, you compute for the rate, you compute for the applied, and then you record the actual. You also record your applied, okay? Now, as discussed earlier, no, the advantage of having a predetermined overhead rate, okay, or a predetermined rate is that it allows you to record the cost, okay, before the accounting period ends. So it allows you to estimate and record that cost. Kaya dito, you can already apply or record your applied, okay, your estimated overhead, okay, before your actual. Normally, your actual overhead, it can only be determined at the end of the period. O, di ba? So, you don't have to wait at the end of the period to record your overhead, which means, okay, you can already estimate the unit cost, okay, the price, okay, and make necessary decisions pertaining to your products, no, or to your production. Ayun lang naman. Is how do you calculate for the department overhead application rates? Okay, so you prepare the budgeted overhead cost per production, okay, and then you choose your activity rate. Once you have the estimated cost and then your activity base, you can now set up your rates. Ayan. And then you look for traceable factory overhead. Okay. You allocate non-traceable cost. Okay, you distribute your budgeted service department's cost. Ito medyo madugo mamaya. I'm going to discuss this. And then you compute for the total budgeted overhead cost and compute your predetermined overhead rates. Okay. Now with emphasis on the following. Okay. What do you do with direct departmental cost? Okay. What are the allocation or what is allocation of indirect departmental cost and your service departmental cost? Okay. So, ayan. Now, before I go to the details, no, pwede nating i-drawing yan eh. For example, ganito ha. 1, 2, and 3. Let's try to visualize. Ganun na lang. Let's say you have two production departments. Let's just call them P1 and P2. Okay? And then you have, let's say, 3 servicing departments. Let's call this S1, S2, and S3. Okay? Now, balikan natin ha. Okay? You have your direct departmental production overhead cost. Okay? This one is also known, direct daw eh. This one is also known as your traceable. Traceable factory overhead. Okay? Let's just use traceable factory overhead. Since they are traceable, let's use blue na yan. We know how much factory overhead, okay, is incurred by this department because it's a traceable factory overhead. Okay, it can be clearly identifiable factory overhead. Okay. So what are the examples of traceable factory overhead? Mhm. So you have your indirect labor, which is traced through payroll. You have the indirect materials used by these departments. Okay. You also have the depreciation of the equipment used, okay, by these departments. And then you have your maintenance, okay, which can be traceable, no? Which can be easily traceable to each department. Wala tayong problema sa traceable factory overhead. Kasi traceable siya, madali siyang i-identify kung sino talaga ang gumamit dyan. Okay. Next, you have your allocation of indirect departmental cost. These are plant-wide factory costs. No? Let's call this allocated. Let's just use allocated factory overhead. Paano ba yung allocated factory overhead? When the entire organization incurs, okay, factory overhead, no, or overhead which can be allocated to this one, no? Like for example, ano kaya, warehouse rent, which can be allocated based on the floor area. Ganon. Or for example, let's say insurance, or maybe depreciation of an equipment which is commonly used by these departments. Okay. So, madali lang yan. You have your allocated factory overhead. You just allocate that based on the application rate. Walang problema dyan. No? We'll have some examples later. So, may allocated factory overhead. So, okay na, no? Meron kang traceable, okay, easily identified, and then you have a common cost, no? You have a common cost for the organization which is allocated. Ayan. I-distribute mo lang siya. Here are some examples like factory rent, building depreciation. You have the factory utilities which can be allocated using kilowatt hours. Tama, spelling ko ng kilowatt. And then you have your factory insurance, okay, which can be allocated based on the department's asset value or the floor space. Okay. Now this is our problem, allocation of service departmental cost. Why? Let's go back to our illustration. Because aside from this factory overhead, okay, these ones, yung servicing natin, yung servicing departments natin, the factory overhead incurred by these departments will also be allocated. This one will be allocated between the two. The cost of this one will be allocated between the two. And this one will also be allocated between the two. Madali lang sana kung ganyan. That's called your direct method. You just directly allocate that to your production departments. Okay? You also have your step method wherein aside from, kunyari, you have this department, no, which provides a service not only to production 1 and production 2 departments, but also to departments S2 and S3. So you also have to allocate some of the cost, no, to these departments. Okay, so after allocating the cost from S1, you now allocate the cost from S2. And in this case, there's no reverse allocation. No? You're not going to allocate it back to S1. You allocate it to S3, P1 and P2. Okay, let's repeat that. S1 will be allocated to S2, S3, P1, and P2. Pag wala na si S1, you now allocate the overhead incurred by S2. To whom? To S3, P1, and P2. Now, after allocating the overhead incurred by S2, you now allocate S3 to P1 and P2. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, you still have your, um, you still have, let's call this your assigned factory overhead or allocated service factory overhead coming from these departments. Okay. Now, anyway, since I already mentioned the direct method and the step method, you also have your reciprocal method. Wherein, okay, we are going to assume, that aside from these departments giving service to P1 and P2, they also give or they also reciprocate services coming from other departments. Diba? So, eto, may service siyang pinoprovide dito, and eto, may service din siya pinoprovide dito. So, the cost allocated to this one will also be allocated to S2, and some cost incurred by S2 will also be allocated to S1. So, paano yan? Umiikot na. Okay, so that's now your reciprocal method. Okay, and we are going to use the algebraic approach for that. Okay, so let's go to the examples. No, for example, your purchasing, which can be allocated based on the number of orders, okay, of purchase, or dapat yan, or purchase value. And then you have warehousing, okay, which can be allocated based on the cost of asset or inventory stored. Factory office, okay, housekeeping and maintenance, which can be allocated based on your floor space. And let's pretend that we are still enjoying. And let's continue. Methods of allocation. Ayan, na-discuss ko na nga. Okay, direct method. S1, S2, S3, P1, P2. Direct method is, you just allocate the cost to P1 and P2. Ganun din for S2. Ganun din kay S3. Okay. For step method, you allocate it to S1. You allocate this to S2 pala and S3, P1 and P2. For S2, you allocate it to S3, P1 and P2. And then S3 will be allocated to P1 and P2 only. For reciprocal method, ayan na. Okay, so paano yan? Anyway, we'll have an example. Patay. Hindi ko na ilagay yung example. Sige, mano-mano tayo. Okay. Let's have the following example. Let's assume that we have the following department. Okay, let's start with the service na lang. Let's start with the service department. Let's say that we have 3 service department. Let's say you have your training. Let's pretend that I have the best handwriting, Okay, so you have your training and ano pa ba maganda? Maybe warehousing service. Warehouse. And then you have your purchasing. Very common. Okay, so you have the following service departments. Okay, and then let's have the following production. Okay, we have the following production departments. Let's say layout. Layout and ano kaya? Layout and cutting or layout and preparation. Layout and prep, and then you have your assembly. Okay. And now let's assume that they have the following costs, no? They have the following costs na ano kayang maganda sa training, no? Kunyari 60,000 na lang. Okay, gawin natin itong 60,000. Let's say this one is 30,000 and let's say that this one is 150. Okay, now for the production, let's assume that you have 20,000 for their overhead and you have 30, hindi, may 30,000 na sa taas. Ano pa bang wala? O, kunyari, 10,000 lang. Okay. So, this will now be the costs incurred. Now, let's assume no, that the training, okay, your department no, that provides a training, okay, allocates cost based on the number of personnel. So, sige, let's try to use that number of personnel. Okay, kunyari, we have 10 training personnel. You have 5 for warehousing. Purchasing, oh, madami na, 10 din. Okay, for production, let's assume that there are 30. Okay, and 15 for the assembly. And highly skilled kasi sila kaya 15 lang. Okay. Now, let's assume that for warehousing, we allocate this cost based on warehouse. Siguro based on area. Okay, let's assume that yung area is measured in terms of, ano ba? Yan. Square meters na lang. Okay. So, ano yung area nito? Siguro 100. Okay, let's say this one is a warehouse. Malaking warehouse, kunyari 4,000 square meter. Ano malaking 4,000 square meter? And then you have 2,000. I'm just imagining, okay? Ayan. And then, for purchasing, let's assume that the cost is being allocated based on materials purchased na lang. Okay, so materials purchased. Ayan. Invento tayo. Paano ba to? Kunyari, ay, ito pa pala hindi natin nalagay. Ano bang maganda dito? Kunyari, we have 2,500 na lang. Yan, para equal. Okay, now for materials, okay, materials purchase, let's just assume that the purchasing department, okay, only caters to your production department. Okay, so this one will be, let's say, 60,000 and you have 40, then you have 40,000. Okay, so, ayun, okay, mag-screenshot na lang tayo. Kunyari na, screenshot nyo na. Ako ay pipicturan ko na lang kasi wala akong notes dito. Okay, wait lang. Ayan, okay, so I can go back to my notes later. So, let's compute, no? Let's start with the direct method. Okay, so let's put direct method. Okay, kung na-visualize nyo, di ba? Direct i-allocate lang yung mga costs from the different servicing departments to your production department. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, let's come up with a table. Okay, so you have training department, you have your warehousing, ayan. And you have here your purchasing. Taran! And then we're going to allocate, ay magkano ba yung cost na natin kanina? You have 60, 30, and 150. So you have 60,000, 30, and 150. Alright. So let's try to allocate these for layout and preparation, and then you have your assembly. Kunyari nagsusulat ka din, no? Imaginin mo. Ayan. Dahan-dahan lang para maalala mo siyang mabuti. So if training is allocated based on the number of personnel, so we need the number of personnel, okay, for layout and assembly. Okay, so let's go back. We are going to use 30 and 15, a total of 45. So that is now our ratio. So you have 30 over 45, and you now have 15 over 45. Let's check if that's correct. Okay. Next, what about our warehouse? Okay. Warehouse, cost will be allocated based on the area. So what is now the area for layout and assembly? It's 25 and 25 for a total of 5,000. So our allocation ratio now will be 25 over 50 na lang. Okay. And then for purchasing, it will be allocated based on the number of materials purchased. Okay. And if you go back, you have 60 over 40, a total of 100. Sana nasusundan nyo. Okay. So the ratio now will be um, 60 and 40. So you have 6 over 10 and 4 over 10. Ayos. Now you just have to multiply this, no? So 30 over 45, that's like 2/3. So your answer here will now be, what's 2/3? So that will be 40,000. And 1/3 will be 20,000. So that's the allocated, no, amount to layout and assembly. Okay. For 30,000, okay, so parang 15,000 and 15. There you go, 15,000 and 15,000. Okay, so 60% of 150, magkano yun? Parang 90,000 yata. Yes, it's 90,000. Nawala na. So you now have 90. And this one will be, there you go, 90 and 60,000. For a total of, how much is the total amount that we are allocating? You have 60 plus 30 plus 150, so that will be 240. This one will be 55 plus 90, that's a total of 145. 20 plus 15, that's 35, plus 60, that will now be 95. And if you add the two, 95 plus 145, that should be 240. Okay, so this one will now go to layout and preparation. This one will be for the assembly. Now, don't forget to add, don't forget to add the existing factory overhead costs, 20 and 10. Okay, and then you divide that by the activity base, okay, kung paano siya i-allocate. Okay. So what we are actually doing now is this part, no? Let's go back. How we are allocating the total factory overhead from S1, S2, and S3 to your production departments. Okay, using the direct method. Now let's go to your step method. Medyo mas madugo yata yung step method. Okay? Ayan, pause muna natin and then feel free to screen capture. Now anyway, take note, this is just the allocated, no? Allocated service factory overhead. Okay? This is not yet the predetermined overhead rate. I'll show you how to compute for that later. Let's just focus on the methods. Okay, so ano na yung susunod? Step. Ano tayo sa step? Is it step method or is it supposed to be step method? Okay. Nalilito ako eh. Taran! Idiots kasi ako. Pagdating dyan. Okay, sige. Let's try to compute. Paano yung step method? Okay, let me explain. It's like this, no? You choose the department, okay? Dalawa yan eh. You have to rank them first, no? You rank them either according to the cost that they incur, okay? So you try to allocate the department first that has the highest cost, Ganon, and then yung second, and then yung third. Or you can start with the department that has the most departments being serviced. Okay? So, ganito na lang. Let's try to come up with an assumption. Okay? So, assuming, gaya nyo, magaling kayo mag-assume. Okay, we start with the training department. Why? Kasi we assume that the training department services the persons in the warehouse, in the purchasing, layout, and assembly. Okay, so we start with the training department. And then let's just continue with warehousing. Okay, why? Because warehousing provides service to purchasing, layout, and assembly. O, tatlo lang. Okay, and then followed by purchasing because purchasing department only services layout and assembly. Okay, so ayun, that will be our assumption. We rank them based on the number of departments that they are servicing. Okay, now in most textbooks, they rank based on their examples. Like for example, our textbook, okay, the rank is based on the cost. So if we are going to follow the cost, we are going to start with purchasing, training, followed by warehousing. Pero this time, ang assumption natin ay based dun sa departments that they are servicing. Okay, so let's start with training. Paano ba to? Okay, so lagay natin dito yung mga departments. Training. Pwede bang shortcutin ko na lang? Makakulang 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Baka mabitin tayo eh. Sige, ganyan na lang. Training, you also have your warehousing, and you have your purchasing. Ayun, you have your purchasing. So first, ay hindi, ilagay muna natin dito. Saan ba natin siya i-allocate? Okay, so umpisa natin kay warehousing. And then meron tayong kay dito. Sana magkasya. Purchasing. And then you have layout and preparation, and then you have your assembly. Alright. Let's talk about the cost. Okay, the cost for this one is 60,000. 60 or 30? Yes, it's 60,000. Then you have 30,000. Okay. And here you have 150. Tama ba? Feeling ko 150. Ayun. So, 150. Yan ngayon ang i-allocate natin. Now, for training, again, yung assumption natin kanina, this will be allocated, okay, using the number of personnel. Okay, so for warehouse, purchasing, and yung dalawa, you have 5, 5, 10, 30, 15. Okay, so let's try to write that. You have 5, 10, 30, and 15. So if you add that, you have 45 plus 550 plus 10, you have 60. So that will now be your ratio. 60 is the total number of personnel. Sir, bakit hindi kasama yung personnel for training? Because we are allocating the cost for training. So we're not going to consider that. Okay, we'll just use 5, 10, 30, and 15. Okay, and using that ratio, 5, 10, 30, and 15, we multiply that by, you multiply that to 60,000. Okay, so patay. 60 divided by 6. Uy, madali lang pala ito. 60 divided by 60 times 5. Okay, so that will now be how much? 5,000. 60,000 times 10 divided by 60,000. So you now have 10,000. Buti pala, nagkataon na ganyan. Okay? Alright. Okay, so you now have 5, 10, 30, and 15. Now let's try to allocate warehousing. Now initially it's 30,000, but take note, no? Out of the 60,000 from training, okay, 5,000 went to warehousing. So we are actually allocating 30,000 plus 5,000 na. A total of 35,000. Now, warehousing, no, for warehouse, we allocate this based on the area. So, let's look at the area of purchasing. What's LAP again? Layout and preparation. And then you now have assembly. Okay? Akyat tayo dito. So, we will just use this, and this. So, why don't we use 100 for training? Because this cost is already allocated. No? The training cost is already allocated to other departments. So, we ignore that. So, what about 4,000? This is the cost that we are allocating now. Okay, to these three departments. Okay? So, di ba? Nag-trickle lang yan. Kaya nga step method. So, we'll just use 2,000, 2,500, and 2,500. Okay, so for a total of 5, 2, so that's 7,000. 2, 2,500, 2,500. Sana wag kong makalimutan. So, you have 2,000, 2,500, 2,500. So, 20 versus 70. So, saan kinuha yan? Sinimplify ko lang. It should be 2,500 over 7,000, 2,500 over 7,000, and 2,000, okay, 2,000 over 7,000. Okay po, now let's try to multiply that, no? Let's multiply that with 35,000. So, we have here our calculator. Ayun, yung ating calculator. Okay, oops, ayan. So, you have 20 u divided by 70 equals times 35,000, 1, 2, 3. Oops, sumobra siya. Na-excite ako. Sorry. So, that's 10,000. So, you now have 10,000 here. So, if you have 35,000 minus 10,000, you now have 25,000, di ba? Which will be distributed between the two. So, this will be 12,500. That's just 25,000 divided by 2. Or if you want, o di 25 divided by 70. Sige na nga, gawin ko na nga. Okay. Para sa mga tinatamad. O yan. Makakabawi din ako sa inyo. 25 divided by 70 equals times 35, 35,000. So, you now have 12,500. Alright. Hey, so, solve na tayo doon, no? And this one, so we're going to allocate purchasing costs. Okay, initially it's 150, but okay, out of 6,000, balik tayo. Out of 6,000, okay, from training, no, 60,000 from training, 10,000 was allocated to purchase. And out of 35,000 to from warehousing, 10,000, another 10,000 is allocated to purchasing. So plus 10,000 plus 10,000. That's a total of 170,000 pesos. Okay. And for purchasing, sabi natin kanina, we allocate this based on the number of materials purchased. So, going back, the number of materials purchased is 60 and 40. 6:4. So, that will now be the basis for our ratio. 6 over 10 and oops, mali. Dito tayo. 6 over 10 and 4 over 10. Tama? Okay, so 6 over 10 times 170. 170. Oops, sorry. And times. So that's 102,000. Okay, and 40%. 170 times 4 over 10, which is 0.4. So you now have, ayun. So you now have 68,000 pesos. Now let's try to check, no? how much is allocated. Huwag nyo lang isama ito, no? Let's just use 30, 12,500, and 102. So 30 plus 12,500, that's 42,500. 42,500, that will be 144,500. We add that to 15 plus 12,500, that's 37,500 plus 68. Okay, so please feel free to compute. Wait, where am I? 37,500 plus 95,500 yata. Okay. So, ayun. And the total, okay, should be equal to yung total ng overhead na dinidistribute natin, which is 60, 30, and 150. Magkano na ba to? It should be equal to 240,000 pesos. Tama ba? If you put that, that will be 96. Yes, I think it's 240. Okay. Screenshot. Now, let's go to your third method, the algebraic method or the reciprocal method. Reciprocal or algebraic method. Okay. In this case, we have to assume some percentages of the services being provided, no, by the different departments, service departments. Okay. Anyway, sige, let's just have an example na lang para mas madali. Ang hirap mag-English kasi. Training, you have your training, you have the warehousing, and then you have your purchasing. Okay, and then let's put training, warehousing, purchasing. Ano na yung isa? Ay, tama, lap. Yan lang. And you have your assembly. Okay, let's assume some percentages. Okay, let's assume na, syempre, training does not provide service to training department. Blanco dapat yan, no? Pati yung purchasing to purchasing, warehouse to warehouse. Dito siguro, pwede. Let's assume that your training provides, ano kayong magandang percent dito? Okay, 5% na lang. Let's say that there's 5% of its services is given to warehousing, and then 10% is given to purchasing. So this is now 15. We still have 85. So let's assume 40% and 45. So I guess that's already 85. Okay. Now, warehousing naman, let's assume that it provides 10% to training. Okay, and maybe siguro 20% to purchasing for the materials. So that's now 30. So we still have 70 to go. Or let's just use 40 na lang ulit. And then you now have 35%. Okay? And then for purchasing, let's just assume, gaya nung sinabi natin kanina, no? Purchasing only provides services to layout and assembly. Gawin natin 70% and 30%. Now, the total should always be 100%. Okay? 5 plus 10, 40, 45. Yes, 100. 15 and okay. This one is 30 plus 40. Oops. 35. Hindi siya 100%. Okay, let's try to correct this. Ito na, para madali yung mathematics. Okay. And then 100, 100. Okay, so if you try to look at this, okay, you will notice that training department provides 5% of its services to warehousing, while warehousing provides 10% of its services to training. So, under this approach, we come up with an equation. Okay, paano ba equation ito? Your total training cost, let's use a different color. Okay, the total training cost is equal. How much is our cost initially? So let's go back. That's 60, 30, and 150. Let me write that down. Okay, you have 60,000, 30. This is the amount that we are distributing. Okay, so this one will be 60,000 plus 5%, okay, of whatever is the cost for warehousing. Tama po? Let's see. 10% of... Ay, no, 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 no. Wait lang. Let's try to analyze this. Ah, yes, it should be 10%, okay? It should be 10% of the cost of warehousing because warehousing provides 10% of its services to training. So whatever is the cost incurred by warehousing, 10% of that should go to training. Yan, that's why we're going to add that to 60. Okay po? And then, okay, for your warehouse, you have an initial cost of 30. Murahin natin yan. You have the initial cost of 30 plus 5%. 5% of the cost of training. Because 5% of the services provided by training goes to warehouses, to the warehouse. No? So whatever is the cost incurred by training, 5% of that will go to the warehouse. Okay po? Ayun. And then you now have, what's P again? Purchasing. Okay, so for purchasing, initially, you will have 150 plus, let's see, it receives 10% of training. Okay, so that will be 10% T plus this 20% of the cost of W. Whew. So these are now our basic equation. No? So by process of prostitution, by substitution, you can compute for W or you can compute for T muna. Okay, so ini-minimay mo. Okay, let's use this one. Let's use this equation siguro. And then let's substitute. No? Let's substitute T for this. Okay, so let's try to do that. W is equal to 30,000 plus 5% of T. 5% of what is T? This one. 60,000 plus 10% of W. Okay, so to simplify, you now have 30,000 plus process of distribution, right? Okay, so what is 5% of 60? 10% is 6,000. So half of that will be 3,000. Plus, tingnan natin para masaya. Or actually, you can remove that already. Anyway, we're going to simplify that later. 5% of 10%, so this will be 0.05, right? 0.05 times 0.1, that will now be 0.005 or 0.5%. Let's just write 0.5% of W. Okay. Now to simplify further, this one will be 33,000 plus. Let's just put that there para hindi na ako magkamali. Okay. So I guess that's it, no? So you have W minus 0.005. W is equal to 33%. Okay, let's assume that we are still enjoying this. Diba? We have 1 doon, invisible na 1. So this will now be 0.99.5%. Tama, 0.995. W is equal to 33,000. Let's try to isolate W divided by 0.995. Divide this by 0.995. Sana nag-enjoy tayo. W now is equal to, so you have Alt Tab. I don't like this process. Pero let's 33.9. Okay, 33. Oops. Divide that by 0.995. Sorry, sumobra na. 95. Tada! Ano ba itong pinasok kong trabaho? 33,165,829,145. Okay, I think I can manage 33,165. That will be 829 or 892. I think it's 829,145. Let's see if the answer is, let's see, 829,145. Okay. Actually, as of this point, we can already round off. Pero, just to minimize errors, okay, wag muna tayo mag-round off. So, this is now the value for our W. Okay. Tadaan! I-square natin yan. Next, now that we have W, we can now compute for T. Okay. So, let's compute for T. T is equal to 60,000 plus 10% of 33,165,829,145. So 10% of that will be 60 plus 3,316.5829145, and that will now be equal to 63,316,5829145. Oops. This one should be, hey, come on. Ayan. So, 63,316,5829145. Let's just multiply this by 10. You have this. You add that to 60 and you will get this. Okay, so sana tama pa rin yung sagot ko. Now we can compute for P. Paano ba yan? P na yan. Okay, so P is equal to, let me just copy the equation, 150 plus 10% of T plus 20% of W. Oops, kamuntik. Okay, so this will be 150,000 plus 10% of, what is T? 63,316. 5829145. 5829145. Or pwede ka na mag-memory in the va. Okay. 20% of W. Okay. 33,165. Siguro nababagot na kayo. Ako nababagot na ako sa ginagawa ko. Kayo pa kaya? Okay. 829,145. 829,145. Okay, so, sige na, 150 plus, alam ko may calculator ako sa gilid eh. Wait lang, 6,331.65829,145 4, 5. Plus, ano ba 20% nito? Okay lang ba na wag ko nang pakita dito? Wait lang, compute tayo. Ayun, cellphone. Buti na lang may cellphone sa tabi ko. Okay. Malas naman. Malas talaga at nalobat siya. So, no choice. Ayan. Dito talaga tayo. Okay, so this will be 0.2. Para makita. Ayun. 0.2 times 33. Tapos pagkatapos ng lahat ito, nagkamali pala ako. 8, 2, 9, 1, 4, 5, 8, 2, 9. 6633. 6633. Oops, nagkamali ako. 165. Sabi ko na nga I can feel it. 165,829. Okay, or you can simply round off. Ewan ko ba, ba't kasi ako, dapat may isa pa akong calculator dito. Ayun. Wait lang. Paki-compute nga. Kunyari, nagko-compute tayong lahat. Ayan. Ayan. So, okay, I'm getting 162,964, 8242. Oh, okay na yan. Okay, 8241. Okay, so this is now the value of your P. Tapos na ba tayo? Hindi pa. Those are just the values for your purchasing, training, and warehousing. Okay, so let's just try to summarize. Starting with your T, training. Now let's use yellow. Feeling ko mas okay ang yellow. Yan. Training, warehousing, and purchasing. Sulat na natin dito 162,964.8241. Okay. Mapicturan ko na nga ito. And so for training, you have 63,316.58,2914. Grabing pahirap ba? Actually, pwede mong i-round off talaga. Trip ko lang gawin kasi ng buo. Para mas mabagal. Kasi kung mas mabagal, mas madali ninyong i-absorb. Diba? Saka makita ninyo yung process. Okay. Pwede ko naman to i-compute ahead of time. Tapos ididikit ko na lang dito. Tapos kagad tayo in less than 10 minutes. Pero baka hindi mo siya ma-absorb. Baka lang naman. Okay, so ayun. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No? So you have T, W, purchasing, okay, and ayan, so i-allocate na natin ito ngayon using this one, using these rates. Okay, so let's try to allocate T to W, P, L, AP, and ASS. Okay, so by simply multiplying that, okay, so you have, ulitin natin 5, 10, 40, 45. So 5, 10, 40, and 45. What is 5% of this? Ayun. Nahanap ko na yung isa kong pang-compute. Ayan. Okay. So you multiply 5% times 63,316. Okay. So, wait lang. Ito pala, tatanggalin na natin dito. Ano? So, tatanggalin mo yan. Ilalagay mo siya dito. Ayun. So, that will be 5%. That's 3,165.83. Okay. And then, 10% of this will be 6,331. Point, okay, 658. Ayoko sanang mag-round off, pero sige. Ito, 33316, and then you multiply that by 40%. You will get 25,326.633. Okay. And then finally, ito, this one will be, ilang percent na? It's, ayun, 45. 45% times this. Okay, sana pare-pareho tayo ng napalabas. I-try nyo rin i-compute, no? Maganda pag nagsasabay tayo. 28, 492, 462, or simply 0.46. Ayan. Solve na tayo dito. Okay, natanggal na siya. Okay. And then let's try to allocate, no? Let's try to allocate this using these rates 10, 20, 40, and 30. So 10% of that will be 3,316.583. Okay. And then wala dito. But here you multiply that with what is our rate? Ayun, so you have 20%. 20% of that will be okay, that will now be 66,633.1616. Tapos this one will be what rate? 40 and 30%. Okay. So multiply natin to ng 40. This one times 40% ulit. Okay. I got 132,000. No, 13,266. Ganun lang pala. 0.3316. And this one, yung rate natin, which is 30, you multiply. Okay, kunyari sinabayan mo ako, very good. Kunyari pareho tayo ng lumabas. Sana naman wag na akong magkamali kasi ayaw ko na mag-edit. 7, 4, 8, something. Okay. Next, 70-30%. Okay. 70% nito, no? So, what is 70% of this? Compute. Okay, you have 1, 5, 2, 6, 6, 8.342. Let's compute here. You have, okay. Putting lang my memory in. You have 87,331.658. Ayan. Hindi ko po ito, kung akala nyo ay mini-mental ko lang yung computation, hindi. May calculator po ako dito sa tabi ko. Ayan. Now, you can get the total. Actually, here you have your initial, no? You have here 60,000. Right? You have 60,000. 30,000, and this is 150. No, 150,000. Now, if you try to remove 63,000, if you add this, no, if you add this, the total will be 63,316.58 something. Okay, which is actually this one. There you go. This one, the total, no, the total will be 33,165.83. Kita naman. And siya dapat ito. Ayun. This one, the total, I'm not really sure, but the total should be equal to that one. Ayan, kayo yung may calculator. Now, okay, we have to get the total for this one, no? Or for these two, because the total should be 240,000. Okay, so you get the total, i-compute nyo yan. Now, let me know, no, in the discussion section or in the comment section if you were able to get 240,000. Now, if there is an error or if there are errors in this presentation, let me know in the comments. Okay? Kung saan ako nagkamali para mai-correct ko naman siya. Ayan. Pero sige na nga, i-compute ko na nga. Now, let's see. This one. Kunyari, masipag ako. Dapat pala sa Excel ko na lang ginawa pala ito, no? So, you now have one. Ay, hindi. Hindi. Ito pala yun. Mali na pala yung napindot ko. Yung memory recall na pala yun. Ito yun. So, this should be 1, 1. Ganun. Advance kasi yung calculator. Ay, advance yung cellphone. Tama. Something like that. 0.376. Ninervous kayo, no? Kasi hindi nag-match siguro yung kinompute nyo kanina. Buti na lang may history. Ang galing ng technology ngayon. 8, 8, 9. Okay, tapos balik-balik. Ito na yata yun. 668. Tama. Ano siya? Ano nga ito? Ayun. 3, 4, 1. And this one will be ayun. Thank God for history. 6, 5, 8. Okay. And the total should be around 240. Hindi siya eksaktong 240. Sa akin parang 239999 something. Okay, so i-check na kung pareho tayo ng output. Okay, so I guess that's it, no? Now that you have your allocated, no? You have your allocated cost. Akala nyo tapos na, hindi pa. This is just the allocated cost. Now, if you go back to our earlier discussion, no? What we are trying to solve is this one. The total of these three. Because the total is your budgeted factory overhead. Now that you have this, you divide that by the activity base used by P2. So if this production department, okay, allocates the cost, no, factory overhead using direct labor hours, then you divide this by the estimated direct labor hours. And that is now your predetermined overhead rate only for this department. Now, for this one, again, you get the total, no, and then divided by the allocation base. Okay po? So, gusto nyo gawin natin yun? Okay. Ayan. So, ito yun, no? For production, you have 20 and 10. Maybe let's just assume that the company is using the direct approach. Okay, so if you have 20 and 10, ayan. So this is the direct method. No? Let's use the blue one. Okay, so balikan natin. You have the layout which is 145 and then 95. You add these costs which are 20 and 10 for layout plus 20 plus 10, you will get 105. You will get 165. Ayan. This is now your estimated factory overhead or budgeted factory overhead. And if you divide that, no, divide that by your direct labor, kunyari lang, we allocate things using your direct labor, things, costs, direct labor hours. Okay, so you have your direct labor hours, let's say 10,000. Okay, what you will get here will be 16.5 per hour, and that is now your predetermined overhead rate for layout and preparation. Okay, now if this one is allocated using machine hours, no, ano ba kunyari, 10,000 machine hours, nagkataon lang, okay, so you will now have 10.5 per hour. Okay, so I guess that's it. Okay, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, no, in our Canvas page. And thank you.